soon to accept that. Now I'm not able to advance the slides. Okay. Oh, shucks. I think I'm. Okay.
You have a little time, Margaret. Keep trying. People are still popping in.
Okay. Still not able to advance my slides here. Let's see here.
It's on your desktop and you're sharing your screen.
Okay.
The arrow buttons sometimes are helpful.
If necessary, maybe one of us could share our screens, and you could just say, "Next slide, please."
Okay. Oops. Something just advanced. Okay. I think the technical difficulty gremlins have disappeared, and we can go ahead and get started. So welcome. This meeting is being recorded. And my name is Margaret Bao. I am a cooperative development specialist with cooperative programs at USDA Rural Development with the Rural Business Cooperative Services. And it is our honor to bring people together to talk about the CARE economy, the subcommittee of the Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development. We have a full agenda today. We will go over the purpose of the Interagency Working Group. We will talk about the objectives of this meeting to talk about the CARE economy. We have a guest speaker to help us understand some of the cooperative businesses that are working in the CARE economy. And then we're going to facilitate a discussion amongst federal agencies of what resources or programs they may have that could be used to support the CARE economy. The major goal for this meeting today is to identify some resources that we can include in a one-stop federal resource webpage that we will have on our USDA Rural Development website. So we have a number of people here today, and so we ask you to please go into chat and write your name, the group that you're affiliated with. If you wouldn't mind sharing your email address, and then say a few words about what interests you in cooperatives, especially cooperatives in the CARE economy. So as you do that, I would like to introduce Dr. Neil Karama, or Dr. Karama Neil, excuse me, Karama. She is our Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development. She's the Administrator for Rural Business Cooperative Services, and she will have a few words to set the stage for why we're meeting today. Dr. Neil?
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's a real honor to be able to speak with you all today. It's just such a thrill. So many people are continuing to join. I think it shows the interest and the importance really of this topic. So we are, again, very excited to have this meeting happening. We're particularly excited that it is happening during Disability Pride Month and actually on today being Developmental Disability Professionals Day. Many people, including people with disabilities, will benefit from paid care at some point in their lives. I think I've heard say sometimes, in fact, all people or most people will benefit from paid care at some point in their lives. This emphasizes the critical role of the care economy for families, for employers, and for the larger local, regional, and national economies. And as we know, cooperative care offers particular benefits. Next slide, please. The 2014 Farm Bill authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to chair this working group to ensure the coordination of cooperative development among federal agencies and private sector organizations. We are honored to have such an important role in supporting cooperative development. The cooperative form of business can be an effective tool to provide economic opportunities to underrepresented people, and cooperatives have taken a prominent role in addressing the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. So because of that, we are so pleased to have many of our partner organizations join us today, both within and outside of the federal government. Next slide, please. As you all know, cooperatives generate jobs, bring needed goods and services to people, especially where there are market failures, and are resilient during economic downturns. They operate in all areas of the country, all areas of the country and all areas of the economy: agriculture, utilities, food service, energy, financial services, insurance, construction, housing, healthcare, education. We could go on. Statistics that we keep on agricultural cooperatives in particular show that 76% have been in existence for 50 years or more. This level of resiliency is particularly important given today's economic, health, and other shocks. Cooperatives of all forms, worker cooperatives, producer cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, remain an important form of business because their form facilitates resiliency and can weather such shocks. Next slide, please. The member patrons of the cooperative own, finance, and use democratically control the cooperative. Financial benefits from the cooperative's business remain with the member patrons in the form of patronage refunds and thereby stay in the local community where the members live. There's been some confusion about programs that cooperatives qualify for because of a misunderstanding about their tax status. Generally, they take the form of corporations taxed under Subchapter T of the Internal Revenue Code, but some are taxed like partnerships and very few are exempt organizations. Next slide, please. While C corporations are required to focus on delivering profits to their shareholders, cooperatives can have multiple goals, including helping their members, employers, suppliers, community, other cooperatives, and the environment. These are goals that are very similar in many ways to the priorities of this administration. Since cooperatives are democratic organizations whose members, sorry, I lost my place here. Since cooperatives are democratic organizations whose members have a voice in how the business is run, cooperatives produce creative solutions, particularly in times of crisis. In the case of worker cooperatives, for example, members can change their operations or opt to take smaller paychecks rather than dismiss workers or go out of business. Farmers can change how they market and produce their produce. Cooperative grocers can rely on relationships with locally sourced producers and flexibly address supply chain issues. Cooperative retailers can move quickly to take advantage of e-commerce. These values and these flexibilities allow cooperatives to fill market gaps. Broadband, electric, rural grocery, and farmer cooperatives are just a few examples of businesses that address community needs that might otherwise go unmet. They also allow socially disadvantaged individuals in industries that have traditionally not paid well to work for themselves and have more control over their earnings. Next slide, please. So we have convened this meeting today to foster cooperative development and ensure coordination with federal agencies and national and local cooperative organizations that have cooperative programs and interests. We hope this group can seize the opportunity to make programs across the federal government better known, better understood, and bring people within and outside the government together for greater synergy in cooperative development. We've created a federal cooperative resource page online and that would facilitate cooperative development. And we've gathered USDA resources in a PDF file that can be updated easily. We'll be reaching out to attendees and other federal partners to gather additional information for this resource. And so now I'll turn this program over to Margaret, who will introduce our guest speaker, Katrina Costa. Margaret?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Neal. So it's my pleasure to welcome Katrina. She is with, she's the program director for home care at the ICA group. And I'm not going to give a very long introduction. Katrina can dive right into this. Katrina has years of experience in the care economy. Katrina.
All right, thank you so much, Margaret. Margaret is a rock star, longtime supporter, and so lovely to be here. And I'm excited to see many familiar faces as well as a lot of new people that I haven't interacted with before. So yeah, it's really just great to see all of the interest that's really forming around care, the care economy, and care cooperatives right now. So happy to be here and to share my passion and experience with you all. So next slide. All right, so just really quickly, as Margaret said, I work at the ICA Group. The ICA Group is itself actually a cooperative. We are a nonprofit cooperative and also the oldest national organization dedicated to the development of employee-owned, worker-owned companies. ICA's mission is to change the nature of work by advancing businesses and institutions that center worker voice, grow worker wealth, and build worker power. And we have 4 programs and a fledgling CDFI that we leverage to achieve our mission, including dedicated programs in the home care and childcare industries. Next slide, please. I know people are coming from a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives, so I did want to start by just sort of level setting on what we're talking about when we talk about the care economy. So home care is supportive care that's provided to seniors and people with disabilities in the home. There are a number of different types of home care that really advance in acuity level and complexity, really starting with personal care and companionship, which is really addressing activities of daily living that are required for people to live at home: bathing, dressing, eating, mobility, and then advances to home health care and private duty nursing. There are cooperatives across all of these different arenas. The vast majority of cooperatives, home care cooperatives at this stage, really focus on personal care and companionship. But over the last really year to 2 years, we've seen a lot of expansion into adjacent industries with cooperative development, so very exciting. On the childcare side, of course, everybody knows what childcare is, but you may be less familiar with the different types of childcare. So there's center-based care, then there's family childcare, which is licensed care that's provided in the home, and then nanny care. Again, there are cooperatives, worker cooperatives represented across all of these different arenas. Not addressing here unpaid care, which exists across both of these and is a very significant portion of the care economy, but of course, too much to cover today. All right, so next slide. So home care supply and demand. So in both home care and childcare, demand very far surpasses supply, unfortunately. In the home care sector, demand for care has just been growing exponentially, truly for decades, but we've seen a really significant advancement in the past decade with the aging, the growth of the aging population in the US. There are tens of millions of seniors and people with disabilities who require care at home. And of course, the COVID pandemic only exacerbated that demand. Already, people wanted to remain at home. That was the preference, the growing preference of seniors and people with disabilities. But just with the very unfortunate death rate at nursing homes, that many more people now want to remain at home. At the same time, however, the home care industry is facing its worst ever caregiver shortage crisis in history. Again, this has been a trend that has been continuing for some time and only worsened with the COVID pandemic. ICA Group estimates that on average, there is 1 caregiver for every 10 clients that require care in the US. It's very difficult to actually define an exact right number, but around 1 to 3 is a much better ratio. So 1 to 10 is a significant undersupply. And actually in some states and communities, that ratio is very, very off balance. For example, we did a home care cooperative market study in Puerto Rico last fall and identified a caregiver to client ratio of 1 caregiver for every 105 clients needing care. So a very dire situation there. As a result, agencies across the country, cooperative and non-cooperative, are citing the caregiver shortage crisis as one of the #1 threats to their business. Almost everyone is turning clients away, and critical care is not being received. So it's a very scary situation, unfortunately. Next slide. On the childcare side, there are an estimated 9 million children that are under the age of 6 who live in households with 2 working parents, and so therefore presumably need childcare. Before the pandemic, roughly half of the population was estimated to live in a childcare desert. So we already had a very difficult situation before the pandemic. And now, since the pandemic, over 16,000 childcare businesses shut down, nearly 9,000 childcare centers, and nearly 7,000 family childcare programs. So very, very scary numbers. And these numbers are actually back from March. And so undoubtedly, these are already a little bit worse. Turnover at childcare centers is very high. Turnover in home care is also very high. You know, I'm the parent of 2 young children, and I can say, you know, even at a parent-led cooperative that pays pretty good rates for childcare, we still lose roughly 2 to 3 teachers every year moving into elementary education or into other fields altogether, because it's simply not a viable long-term profession for most caregivers. And it's sad because many of them really love it and would love to do it, but just are unable to for economic reasons. Next slide. And of course, the misbalance between demand and supply is driven by poor quality jobs. Unfortunately, even though they are extremely critical jobs, they can be very emotionally rewarding and loved by caregivers. The job conditions are just not sustainable at this time. The average hourly wage in both home care and childcare is around $12 per hour, with average annual salaries around $20,000 to $25,000 per year. When you consider what's happening with inflation and housing prices and gas and food prices, it's nearly impossible to imagine how someone could sustain themselves, let alone a family, on a salary like this. And the work is very difficult. It is physically, emotionally, mentally taxing. And so the rewards, the economic rewards are just not there. Benefits are really limited. And then another really core issue is lack of advancement opportunities. In my position focused on home care, I've had the opportunity to meet many amazing caregivers who've been in the field for 20, 30 years and maybe have increased their wages by $1 to $2 per hour. So that is a very unfortunate situation. This is really driven by a significant public underinvestment in care work, home care and childcare, and really broadly by a lack of valuing and recognition of the importance of care work in our society and our economy as a whole. And I would say that this is no accident. Care work is deeply rooted in historical and structural systems of racism, classism, and sexism. The vast majority of care workers in both childcare and home care are women, women of color, and immigrants, and actually, interestingly, increasingly older women. There are fewer young women entering into the space. And so really, unless we make care jobs good jobs, we will be continuing these structures of economic injustice, economic disparity. And, I think it goes without saying with that background that clearly we need a different model. And this is where cooperatives really come in. Next slide. So in contrast, worker-owned care cooperatives respect and value care workers as professionals and experts. This particular point cannot be understressed. It is a very critical point. A lot of care workers are just simply not respected in the broader industry. You know, for obvious reasons, that's unacceptable. Care cooperatives place workers at the center of business decisions as the people on the front lines. That makes logical business sense. They prioritize improved working conditions, support caregivers to provide better, more consistent care, offer career advancement, and build individual and community assets and wealth. I just wanted to offer a couple of demonstrations of how this works in practice. So for example, in 2020, we do an annual benchmarking study in the home care sector, and we found that home care cooperatives paid almost $3 more per hour than non-cooperative agency competitors. And also, cooperatives tend to hire from within for back office positions. So for example, at Home Care Associates of Philadelphia, over 80% of their office staff were former caregivers, which really changes the dynamics and understanding of caregiver needs on the ground. So it's really important and also demonstrates that professional advancement opportunity that exists. So, you know, of course, while the cooperative model itself is not a panacea, it's not going to resolve all the problems. There are much bigger systemic problems that we need to address. It's an incredibly strong model that really shifts the structures of power and incentives in care work and in care businesses that make a really important difference in the lives of caregivers today, and really long-term set them up to reap the rewards of public policy change and investment that hopefully is going to come down the line soon. I think we're having a moment of recognition, so hopefully there will be change soon. Next slide. So there are an estimated 450 worker cooperatives across the US in all industries, and about 25 worker-owned care cooperatives that exist at current across 12 states and employing over 2,500 workers. While it's a small number, we are really seeing very dramatic increases now. The first home care cooperative, for example, was launched in 1985. That was Cooperative Home Care Associates. And there were only 4 cooperatives that launched in the preceding 25 years. But in the last 10 years, we've seen 16 new cooperatives join. And I am aware of at least 15 new cooperatives that are under development in both home care and childcare at this exact moment. And literally every week, I'm getting a new inquiry from different organizations, individuals around the country. And it's been really fascinating to see all of the different entities that are getting interested in care cooperatives, worker centers, unions, nonprofits, and community development organizations. So I think it's really gaining a lot of traction, and there's a ton of opportunity. Next slide. I think we, those of us who work in these sectors feel really good about the progress that we've made, but also recognize we have a lot more work to do. Nearly all cooperatives struggle with recruitment and retention, despite having much better turnover and lower turnover and better retention rates. Cooperatives are not immune to the larger economic struggles, and so are very much feeling the pain of this current moment. Caregivers routinely pay less than a living wage, and being a cooperative doesn't really change the economics of that. Yes, cooperatives pay better, and that's very important. But given these larger sort of systemic barriers that are in place, there's only so far that cooperatives can go. So again, not immune to the larger systems. Only the largest cooperatives at this moment offer health and other advanced benefits, which is a big problem that we're thinking a lot about. Of course, you don't want care workers who are providing critical care to not have care themselves. That's not a sustainable or fair solution or situation. So this is something we're thinking a lot about, and of course would like to change. Few cooperatives pay regular patronage dividends. I think a really key point to make here is that care cooperatives that primarily operate and rely on public programs for home care and childcare especially struggle to pay patronage. Profit margins are so low You have to operate at such a large volume to just make the business work even at a break-even level. And so it's just a real challenge. Unfortunately, we find ourselves as consultants in this field recommending that cooperatives actually diversify into the private pay out-of-pocket markets in order to just be financially sustainable. But of course, that is not at all the message that we want to be sending, that only those who have money can access quality care. So this is something, again, that we're thinking a lot about, and a condition that, we all need to be addressing. And then finally, democratic governance is just challenging. Democracy is hard. Very few of us have much experience really implementing it on the day-to-day in a business environment. And of course, you have, caregivers who are typically coming from disempowered backgrounds where their voices are not heard. And so it just takes a lot of practice, a lot of training, and a lot of time just to kind of settle into what democracy means in the workplace. Next slide. So really, in summary, in order to have the impact that we desire, we need to strengthen existing care cooperatives. We really need to grow the census and the size of care cooperatives. I think nobody would think that 25 cooperatives are going to change very large and powerful industries. So we need to grow and really strengthen our voices. And we really need to push for large scale industry change so that we can really actualize on the cooperative vision that we have. Next slide. And just to note, I think this is really important, and it's very, very true to my heart. Just having a lot of cooperatives and larger cooperatives will also not resolve the issue. It's very difficult for independent cooperatives operating alone to really, compete against large, very well-funded national franchises and chains. There's a lot of private equity in home care, for example, that's entering in. And so we need to be bringing cooperatives together and working smarter, not harder, and really pooling resources and power to be able to better compete and push for industry change. So in the home care industry, we are currently working to launch a secondary cooperative, a cooperative of cooperatives for home care called Elevate Cooperative. And in childcare, we are working with SEIU to launch a secondary cooperative of family childcare businesses in Chicago that will do similar things, really, providing back office products, services, systems, coaching, support, peer exchange, to be able to really strengthen and grow both of these sectors. Next slide. So finally, just tying into the theme of this meeting today, of course, more resources are needed to really be able to actualize on this vision. We need more funding for urban cooperative development. I have to recognize USDA Rural Cooperative Development has invested and been such an incredible supporter of home care cooperative development, in particular in rural areas. We are seeing a very large and growing demand for technical assistance by BIPOC communities, which is wonderful, but they are primarily located in urban communities. So this has created a little bit of a challenge for us as technical assistance providers. We need to have more funding to develop secondary cooperatives or apex cooperatives, as I talked about, to really drive all of this up and forward, really strengthen the sectors and grow. I have to shout out to Cooperative Development Foundation here, who again has been such a huge supporter of all of this work and is a big supporter of the development of Elevate Cooperative, the secondary cooperative for home care. More funding for technical assistance. A lot of the caregivers that start and run these cooperatives are caregivers, as I said, which is wonderful. That's what we want. But of course, they're not coming with business degrees and formal experience running businesses. So we need to provide that technical assistance until they're really set up to run on their own. Cooperative governance training for all the reasons I mentioned before, and then really vocational training. We've got a big issue in home care in particular with workforce development programs and funders saying, well, home care, those are bad jobs, so we don't want to train people for bad jobs. ignoring the fact that it's the fastest growing occupation in the country and that we need to invest and make the jobs better, not transition people into other industries, worsening the whole scenario. We also need preferred rates and contracting for high road home care employers and childcare employers. There's really no market incentive at this stage to be a high road employer and to treat your caregivers better, which is not a good situation. So again, we need to create those rewards so there is incentive, so more people do it, and those who do provide high quality employment at this stage are also rewarded for making that investment into their caregivers. And then finally, I would underline this about 1,000 times if I could. We need policy change. We need public investment in care work. We simply can only do so much within the current market conditions and sort of policy landscape. We must make investments in care work. And if we don't, we will continue to see the economy and families and individuals who need care suffer. And of course, that is not something I'm going to sit back and take lightly. So I hope you will all join me in these efforts. And I just want to thank you all so much for offering this opportunity for me to present to you today. Thank you.
Oh, Katrina, that was wonderful. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
My
Thank
goodness.
you.
And we can hear your passion. And Katrina, how many years have you been working on these issues?
Yeah, so it's about 5.5 now, and actually did not have any background in home care or cooperatives before, but I dove right in, and yeah, I'm, as you said, very deeply passionate about these issues now. Once you meet the caregivers, it's hard not to be. These are
Right.
very, very special, hardworking people who are very committed and deserve so much more.
Right, right. And one of the neat things is the agency I work for, USDA Rural Development, we do have some rather small grant programs called the Rural Cooperative Development Grant and the Socially Disadvantaged Group Grant. And some of that funding has been able to pay for a national conference that we've had in person and obviously online because of COVID. And that has been an opportunity to really bring people together and hear each other's stories and know that you're not working in isolation. And I've attended some of those conferences that Katrina has been instrumental in bringing together, and they're very important in the lives of the caregivers. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so next up, we're going to have the opportunity for Doug O'Brien. He's the president and CEO of the Apex organization for cooperatives across the United States called the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA. And he's going to share with us a few thoughts about why the cooperative economy is interested in the care economy.
Yeah, but thank you, Margaret. And I will be very brief. I do want to start with a huge thank you to Dr. Neal and the entire team, Margaret and everyone in Cooperative Services at Rural Development for putting together today's conversation and the resources that you're working on, and the entire kind of reinvigorated and robust agenda for the interagency working group on co-op development. It's really exciting from the cooperative community here in the United States to see USDA and rural development really take this ball and run with it. We appreciate it. I do want to just mention that today's event is really especially appropriate on Disability Awareness Day, and in particular how co-ops can be part of the solution to ensure that differently abled people have access and opportunity as everyone else does. So I think that's great. That Margaret mentioned, just a couple seconds on the National Cooperative Business Association. We are the apex or umbrella association for all kinds of cooperatives here in the United States. We also do development work here in the U.S. as well as internationally. That means that we've got all kinds of co-ops in our association, everything from farmer co-ops and rural electric cooperatives to credit unions to worker co-ops to housing co-ops, to food co-ops, and on and on. And it gives us a particular perspective. And our mission actually is to promote, defend, and develop cooperatives. That's why this conversation is so important. I'll talk about that develop cooperatives just for a moment. Our mission, and it carries forth those principles that Dr. Neal referred to at the top, is to ensure that people understand how cooperatives can be part of the solution to some of the critical challenges of today. Katrina did an excellent job of laying out what a challenge home care, whether that's for adults and elderly people or for children, what a challenge it is today for people. And we know that cooperatives can really be a part of that solution. And it could be the part of the solution at scale. Katrina also did a really nice job at the end of laying out, well, what would that take? So I'm not going to repeat that, but I feel compelled to talk just a moment about what co-ops have been able to do in other sectors and in other situations as a solution. When we think of in the rural context, the rural electricity of over 50, nearly 60% of the rural United States, continental United States are served by co-ops. That was a huge challenge in the 1930s when almost all cities had access to electricity and essentially no rural places did. The short story there is the cooperative business model in partnership with the federal government accelerated that access and today continues to make sure that rural people have access to affordable and reliable electricity. The farmer cooperatives is another example. In the early 1900s, farmers lost their place in the market as agriculture economy became more industrialized. Farmers looked to cooperatives to ensure that they could get to scale, not only scale in size, but scale in sophistication and the ability to work within that market. And again, part of the secret sauce of why agriculture cooperatives, and you saw all those brands, I mean, it's a major part of our food sector, up to 80% in dairy, for instance, of all dairy products are touched by food co-ops. That happened, at least partly, if not largely, with the help of the federal government, appropriate help, technical assistance, financing, appropriate type of subsidies. And these are the kinds of things that if brought to bear in the care economy, we believe many more people would be able to use cooperatives as a solution to meet this societal challenge. The final thing I'll mention is, and Katrina mentioned the Cooperative Development Foundation. We're affiliated. They're our partner here at NCBA, the 501c3 affiliate, and they have some resources that they've been working on with that home care initiative, working with USDA, working a lot with ICA Group and others across the country to really increase the sophistication and the knowledge base, and hopefully it's something that can contribute to USDA's work right here today. So again, I just really want to say thank you to the team at USDA and in particular to the folks in the federal government who have joined this conversation today. We just appreciate it so much and stand ready to support and help however we can. So thank you, Margaret and Dr. Neal.
Very good. Thank you so much, Doug. And thanks for those thoughts. They really helped frame a little bit more about the relationship, about the possibilities for partnership with our sister federal agencies. So what we would like to do is to move into the next phase of this conversation, and an opportunity for some of the federal agencies, representatives of federal agencies that are in attendance here, to share with us some ideas about resources that your particular agency might have that could be used by cooperatives that are active in the care economy. And when we talk about resources, we're thinking broadly. We're thinking about research or some of the areas of focus of your particular agency. We're thinking about the connections that you may have to stakeholders. And of course, we're also thinking about some of the monetary supports, the grants, the loans, and the loan guarantees. And we're also trying to be broad in our thinking about the care economy. Katrina has talked quite a bit about the home care and child care, but it could also involve care for people with disabilities, be they physical, intellectual, cognitive, or a mental illness, care for people in recovery, and also care for our military veterans. So to kick off this discussion, I shamelessly asked my a colleague, Tim O'Connell. He is also with USDA Rural Development, but he's with a part of the agency called the Innovation Center. However, full disclosure, I worked with Tim closely for, oh my goodness, 15, 20 years. He was a co-op development specialist with USDA Rural Development in Hawaii. So he knows co-ops well. He's been engaged with helping develop cooperatives across the islands of Hawaii. But he also has another view. He interacts quite a bit with other federal agencies. He's moved back to the mainland. He's out of Portland. And he's interacting with other federal agencies. So he has an interesting perspective on some of the resources that the federal government has. So what I've asked him to do is to share some examples of resources at USDA Rural Development that cooperatives have used in the care economy. And I'm going to turn off these slides so that we can start seeing one another. And hopefully this will work because I've had some gremlin issues here. So there we go. And I hope we're seeing people. Yes. So there's Tim.
Yep, I'm here. Thanks, Margaret. I appreciate that introduction. And it's an honor to be presenting today after spending many years doing cooperative development work in Hawaii and Micronesia. Like Margaret said, I did relocate back to the mainland about 6 years ago to take a new position as a regional economic development coordinator for USDA Rural Development, recognizing that we have at USDA Rural Development 3 funding streams, primarily our Rural Utility Service, which finances and funds our infrastructure, water, sewer, broadband, electricity, those fundamental parts of a rural community that are needed. We also have our Rural Business Service, which Dr. Neal is head of, and that's actually kind of our business financing arm, guaranteed loans and grants, and also our esteemed Cooperative Services Program, which is sponsoring today's webinar. And then our third funding stream is our Rural Housing Service, which funds our single family and multifamily housing programs, as well as has our what I call our nonprofit financing arm, which is our Community Facilities Loan and Grant Program. And the Innovation Center was created to kind of help link those silos, because oftentimes as a federal agency, we don't even, besides talking externally, we don't talk internally as well as we should. So the Innovation Center was kind of developed to be the bridge between those silos. So as we're going out and talking with our constituents, our local communities, our rural communities, and our federal agency partners, that we are bringing the whole breadth of rural development resources to the table when we're talking. And so, and part of my work, I'm like Margaret said, again, I'm based in Portland, Oregon, and cover the West region. I do have counterparts, so we are well covered across the U.S., but some of the information that I've come across, and I'll be presenting today basically on 2 main projects that I've kind of come across in my work in the last couple of years around childcare, because a lot of the work, whether you're in whatever sector, whether it's outdoor recreation or other types of activities, childcare is percolating as a top issue and need, and a barrier to job creation and economic development. And so I'm going to highlight kind of 2 of our programs that we have available, but also in doing this research, we've just on the NAICS code of childcare, rural development has funded over $61 million in investments over the last 9 years. So we have been providing a lot of funding through such program as our Business and Industry Guaranteed Loan Program, Community Facilities Direct Loan and Program, and also another main one is our Renewable Energy for America program, which helps small businesses reduce their energy load through energy efficiency and also through renewable energy sources. So those are different programs that can be accessed. And again, one of them I'm going to highlight is a Rural Business Development Grant that was funded out of the state of Montana. And it was a feasibility study grant to look at a center-based childcare for a group of anchor employer institutions in north central Montana. And you really can't get more rural than Montana and a small city in Montana. And they were basically looking at the local hospital, the local utility cooperative, the local college, as well as the public school district as being the kind of the owners of this potential cooperative. And the applicant, this is where the partnerships come in place, was an economic development district it is funded through the EDA, Economic Development Administration, which is a good partner of ours across the U.S. In obtaining funding and assistance. Now, this part of this feasibility study, they looked at a community survey, which I found was interesting. Is I think some of the needs were previously articulated on some of the other speakers today on the child care portion. But some of the biggest issues that they were found is that there's just a lack of child care in general to try to find employment or educational opportunities. There was a large percentage of people who were looking to actually to have more kids and identifying that infant care was a need. Some of the needs were having childcare outside of normal business hours because there's a lot of jobs and other things that aren't an 8 to 5 type of opportunity. And then those that did have childcare, of course, there was issues regarding too much TV, lack of too much of a child to teacher or caregiver ratio. And then, of course, having your children go to one center is also can be problematic in areas. So basically what that study did is developed several recommendations and options, whether to have basically a nursery or an infant-based component to it or not. And it found it was feasible, but as we all know, unfortunately, COVID hit about the time the feasibility study was completed. So I think they're having to backtrack a little bit and kind of regroup and go forward with that. But again, the interesting thing it was a feasibility study done to identify a group of anchor institution employers to help drive this in a rural setting. And the other one I'm going to talk about kind of in depth a little bit is a community facilities direct loan program out of Wyoming. And it was a $2.354 million loan that actually helped construct a new facility. And the interesting discussion here, or the information, was that it's, sometimes we just see the numbers, $2.5 million community facilities loan, but there was really a good backstory to that, because we talked to the applicant and they had given their perspective on applying for RD funding. And it's, we're not the easiest agency, but we do have staff that can help through the process. And they had wished they had obtained knowledge of rural development funding before they'd gone down the path that they had, because they didn't contact our Wyoming State Office staff until about halfway through their process. And of course, with our requirements, they wish they had, again, it would have been a lot easier if they would have contacted RD staff early. So I guess one of the takeouts for today is, if you are looking at financing any of your care facilities type of projects through rural development, is to contact your state office staff early and often, just to make sure that there's a good fit, that we can get some of the requirements out in the open, and just the process outgoing. And just real quick, some other examples. The USDA, we partnered with the Red Lake Nation in Minnesota to provide $11.3 million for a tribal college campus. And part of that college campus, they did include a child care center for the students that can have on-site child care. It was 4,200 square feet. That was included a kitchen that would provide meals for the kids as well as the student parents. And another example is what kind of the typical project we probably see is the Capital Stack project, where we're funding just a part of the project. But a community action agency in Maryland got for a 6,500 square foot facility, got a $132,000 grant from rural development and a $68,000 guaranteed loan from rural development, as well as Health and Human Services, the grant for quality improvement, as well as a local CDFI provided the funding. So that was a good example of multiple partners coming together to provide the funding for a facility. So basically, it's just kind of a summary and a wrap up. We do offer a whole host of federal programs for financing facilities. I know that the previous speaker had mentioned technical assistance and other types of soft funding, and we do have some of the programs available at Rural Development for that, i.e. the Rural Business Development Grant for funding feasibility studies. And recently, USDA Rural Development also published a joint resource guide for childcare facilities in partnership with Health and Human Services, the Adult and Family Services Agency. And I can put the link in the chat after I'm done speaking here. But in partnership with that, in last calendar year, we partnered with the Federal Reserve Bank out of San Francisco as well as out of Minneapolis, and basically put together funding workshops for care facilities in partnership with EDA, the Federal Reserve, and other agencies in basically the 13 Western states. And so there's a good discussion on the different types of funding activities that are available, not only with rural development, other funding agencies. So that kind of wraps up my talk. Again, I think the outcome would be if you have funding needs, and I think we can put a chat in the link also to our state offices that we have at Rural Development, is to contact those people early and often so that we can get, I think, the best outcome for all. So with that, Margaret, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, that is great information, Tim. And thank you for those concrete examples. Sometimes sharing examples like that helps people think about, oh, we could do this, or, oh, I didn't think about that. So that's very helpful. Thank you for that, Tim. I was just checking the chat and I saw, and I'm going to put her on the spot. I apologize for this, but Stone Kaiser, are you available? I believe you are the lead for the community development, the learning community on childcare with the Federal Reserve System. And I was wondering if you would be willing to offer a few words.
Sure, no problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Sloan Kaiser. I'm a representative from the community development function for the Federal Reserve System. I'm based out of our Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia regional bank, and I do vice chair our Federal Reserve System early care and education, so our child care learning community. Thank you for having me and for this great information. I've made a ton of notes for follow-up, but I would just like to be able to offer some of the resources and ways that we are able to partner with different community stakeholders or agencies that are looking to ultimately expand supply in the care economy. So I'll drop some links in the chat, but ultimately the way that we are able to engage is through research or partnerships. As the previous speaker mentioned, 2 of the regional banks partnered around funding workshops. And most of our research is really rooted in the ways that the care economy can expand labor force participation as it relates back to our dual mandate. And so often our research will include data around the potential economic impact of either expanding supply of the care economy, specifically within the child care space, both for working parents, but also for the early care and education workforce. And so we have, like I said, I'll drop a few links, but we do have a few different joint research briefings that we've put out as a learning community, but I will also just mention that each regional bank may also have research specifically targeted to a certain geography within their jurisdiction. And so I will put my email and feel free to reach out to me, and I would love to make connections where applicable. And it is really helpful for our team to have an understanding of what some of the research needs are so that we can, that can help inform future research. We typically, we do both qualitative and quantitative research, and actually have an upcoming briefing series that we're hoping to release in Q1 of 2023. And within that, would love to be able to elevate some strategies or case studies such as cooperatives that are really addressing the supply and demand mismatch in the care economy. So I will drop some links in the chat, and I'm happy to connect outside of this meeting. But again, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to come on and share about our work.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's helpful, and it's helpful to think that resources include research and the potential for research. So thank you for that. Okay, looking at the people that are in our meeting, I'm going to put someone else on the spot. Craig Kaplan, are you available? You are with the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy, with the Health Resources and Services Administration. I was wondering if you would be willing to share some thoughts of resources for the care economy.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. Yes, the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy is within HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration, which the goal is to enhance access for a variety of different priority populations. The rural, the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy is interesting because we are part of HRSA, but we report directly to the Secretary of Health and Human Services with recommendations on policy. We fund rural health relevant policy research, and then we also administer grants to communities. And the work of each informs each other. The FRHP was created under Section 711 of the Social Security Act. I was looking around. We fund, there's this Rural Health Information Center, RHI hub, that we help fund. It's pretty much a clearinghouse of all things rural health related, and haven't really done much on cooperatives, but I did find a toolkit on rural health networks and coalitions that includes cooperatives. I can drop that in the chat box. There's also rural health research. There's a link I can provide to the rural health research we've done. I mean, the workforce is obviously a big issue for rural health and behavioral health and other issues. But we also have the rural health value. The value-based care focused. I'm not sure to the extent to which cooperatives have been involved in value-based care, but we have resources related to that. And also we have some of the grants we fund include rural community programs that are FRHP's community-based grant programs that are authorized under Section 330A, address the unique care challenges faced by rural communities and serve to increase access to care. And then there are different potential grants like that, different creating rural health networks. And so that may be a potential resource. So I can drop these links into the chat box.
That would be helpful. Yes, thank you. Any other thoughts that you'd like to share or resources that you were thinking about? Oops. We may have lost him.
Oh, you're talking, it's still me? So-
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, those are the ones.
Yeah,
I thought you were asking more generally. No. I'll drop I'll drop the links in the box.
Perfect. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for attending. You've attended some of these meetings before, and we appreciate the interest of the Rural Health Policy Office. So thank you for that.
No, happy to be here.
Yes, good. Thank you. I noticed that we have a couple people in the meeting that are from the Department of Labor. I'm wondering if Kevin Thompson or Nancy Taylor, if one of you good folks would be willing to get on the line and share some ideas. Hey, Nancy. Thank
Hi.
you.
Hi. I'm Nancy Taylor. I'm with the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration. I am new to this committee. I'm sitting in kind of for Frank Sluka, who's a part of the committee, and he was not able to attend today. So he did ask me if I could join on his behalf. I was happy to see Kevin Thompson because he may be a part of the committee, but he may not be available. So I was listening in, and thank you all for having this. Such great conversations that are going on today. Frank wanted to share, I think one of the questions was, how can the federal government help in this effort that's you're leading? And as the Employment and Training Administration, we primarily we fund state and local agencies and entities. We don't provide funding directly to individuals, but our services are being provided for employment and training opportunities. And so one of our programs, which is the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act system, Frank indicated that could be of help to the cooperatives by way of helping with recruiting staff, training a pipeline of care workers, and perhaps incumbent workers training to help the co-ops thrive. But I heard earlier the concern that some of our funding grantee organizations do not view the training for caregivers as a priority. However, there is that opportunity. So I think that what we can offer is, certain links to our programs that provide those type of training opportunities. Most of our grants, shall I say, provide incumbent worker training opportunities, provide training for those individuals who want to move into the child care services. So it's just trying to identify which specific grants would offer those services because we have such a large variety of partnerships out there. Targeting one specific or multiple may be a little challenging, but we do have programs, grant funding programs like apprenticeship programs that may focus on caregiver services. And that would be something to look into that, for our programs to provide resources on. Let's see. And I'm not sure if, like I said, if someone else from ETA would like to add some additional information that they may be aware of on a more specific level.
Yeah, Nancy and Margaret, this is Kevin Thompson with ETA. Had a couple of
Kevin.
things to mention. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A couple of things to mention based on some of Nancy's comments. One of the things the department and this administration are certainly emphasizing is the growth of apprenticeships in the United States. We've made significant investments in intermediaries that are promoting apprenticeship. We've made direct grants and aid to try to boost apprenticeship in the country. Governors certainly have been stellar in terms of identifying opportunity to expand both youth and adult apprenticeship in their states. Governor Murphy from New Jersey was just elected the other day or today to be the new chair of the NGA. He would probably be announcing a chair initiative, but based on his record, he has been a great supporter of apprenticeship. One thing I wanted to specifically mention is last November, Marty Walsh, the Secretary of Labor, announced the Apprenticeship Ambassador Initiative, which attempted to bring together industry, labor, education, equity, and workforce leaders to partner with our Office of Apprenticeship. And the inaugural group of ambassadors that came out of that announcement were actually announced earlier this week. And the cohort, there are 207 ambassadors. They are drawn from CBOs, education community, employers themselves, equity partners, industry associations, labor organizations, program sponsors, and workforce partners. And I think the message for this group, I will put the URL for the Secretary's announcement in the chat, but those 207 organizations might represent some access points or apertures if folks do want to have a longer conversation about how apprenticeship can meet the need for home care and health care. The other thing I wanted to mention, over the years, ETA and the department have supported a clearinghouse for competency models. And we do have a competency model entitled Long-Term Care Supports and Services. That's a model that folks might want to take a look at. There are some other models that also can be accessed, and I'll put the link in the chat, that are certainly centered on the healthcare industry in the United States. And then finally, just to accent what Nancy said in terms of grant opportunities, we do have our own grant page, but the Department of Labor in recent months has really installed a web page that really allows you to track and find out about announcements not only from the Department of Labor or from our organization in ETA, but other precincts in the department like OSHA and others. Primarily ETA, I think, would be the first source and the first agency you might want to consult. So those three things are worth mentioning: the ambassadors and the competency models and that grant availability site. I'll close with that, Margaret.
That is great information. Thank you, Kevin. And Kevin has participated in our conversations in the past. Thank you, Nancy. Wonderful to have you aboard over at ETA with the Department of Labor.
Thank you.
Yes,
I
yes.
post two links in the chat. I put in what I believe Kevin was referring to, the grants.gov. That's an announcement for not just ETA funding opportunities, but all federal funding opportunities. And then the link to the apprenticeship website, apprenticeships, for the apprenticeship grants.
Good information. Thank
Okay.
you. And that could be used across the care economy. That could be used for childcare or disability care.
Yeah, well, the grants it's for, specific entity types to apply for different funding opportunities. So it's just a platform to take a look and see what opportunities are available out there. And there's a variety of them that may offer services that link to the care opportunity programs.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you
You're
for that.
welcome.
Yes, and thank you, Kevin, for giving us some ideas of what's happening, what's on the horizon. That's very exciting to hear. I wanted to turn this slightly towards the Centers for Disease Control. There are a number of agencies within CDC, and I believe, and I'm going to put you on the spot, I've yet to interact with you, Dr. John. I believe your last name is O'Meara. Are you available? There you are.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. And you said my name perfectly, so that's great. Yeah, thank you all so much for having me here today, and thank you for the invitation. It's been just wonderful to hear the conversation, hear about all of this important, exciting work, and all of the other collaborative and supportive resources that I'm learning about, frankly. So that's wonderful. Yes, my name's John O'Meara. I work at the CDC, specifically in our Healthy Aging branch, and within that on our Alzheimer's disease team. So certainly a lot of our work is around promoting brain health, supporting older adults and healthy aging, and then also included within that is through supporting caregivers and caregiving in general. And within the caregiving arena, we have a number of ongoing activities, resources, and funded projects. I can give a brief overview, and I will certainly put links in the chat as well, as others have been doing. Of course, as you can imagine, at CDC, one of our primary areas of activity is around data and surveillance. And we have a number of activities related to caregiving in the data field. So for example, one of our large national surveillance systems, which is called the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, includes questions on a module regarding caregiving, I should say. And so this provides caregiving data by state, and then our program helps translate that data into useful resources like infographics, and we provide those available, or those are available on our website, which I can put the link in the chat. Some of those data are also housed in our Alzheimer's disease and healthy aging data portal, which is on our website. So that's sort of like a nice point and click interface for those data. And then we publish on those data as well. We are continually analyzing them and publishing them as we're able, and then also working to revise and update and keep those caregiving questions current. And then in addition to the data, we also provide funding to a variety of national, state, county, and tribal organizations. At the state and county level, these are public health agencies, all primarily oriented, of course, towards activities that aim to improve the lives of people with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, but then also to provide support for their caregivers. And this is through two main awards, the National Healthy Brain Initiative Award, and then BOLD, which stands for Building Our Largest Dementia Infrastructure Award. And I just wanted to mention one specific funded project through the latter, through BOLD, which is for a public health center of excellence on dementia caregiving. And so we fund that Public Health Center for Excellence on Dementia Caregiving, which is run through the University of Minnesota. And they have lots of great resources and provide technical assistance to state and local health departments regarding dementia caregiving. And actually just last month they hosted a conference titled The Public Health Opportunities and Challenges of Dementia Caregiving. There's lots of other great resources and tools on our website, for example, around care planning. We have a Healthy Brain Resource Center, which is a point and click website that helps users find information and materials around supporting actions to promote brain health, which includes resources on around caregiving. So yeah, just lots of great resources that people can draw from. I am happy to put links to all that in the chat and also, be of further assistance. I did also want to mention as well that I sit on the RAISE Family Caregiving Advisory Council, which is one run through ACL, the Administration for Community Living within the Department of Health and Human Services. And forgive me, I'm new here to this group, but I would certainly suggest consulting with ACL as well if they aren't already here. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
That is great information, and it's exciting to hear all the resources that are together there. That thank you for that. Is there anyone else here from the CDC? I saw a name of Joanne Theory. Are you available?
Yes, I'm here, and this is the first time I've attended this meeting, so thank you so much for including us. I've been thinking a lot about this as I've been listening to the conversation. I don't have a lot to add to some of the discussion that has already occurred, but I did want to point out a couple programs or resources that we have that people may find interesting. So we have, in terms of caregiving, we have done some work recently during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we put out some guidance for direct service providers that may be helpful. We've also funded projects through partner organizations such as the Association for University Centers on Disabilities, and one such program focused on again encouraging direct service providers to stay safe and be vaccinated. There's been some nice PSAs that have been developed through the state of Minnesota in this particular area. We've also have a large interagency delegation of authority or a memorandum of understanding with ACL, and I support the suggestion to include ACL in some of these discussions. But in that particular cooperative agreement, we work with ACL to get funding to several of their different organizations that they support to provide activities lately, specifically around COVID-19. But that said, they provide resources to a variety of organizations, such as the area agencies on aging, the Centers for Independent Living, protection and advocacy systems, and other organizations that serve both people with disabilities as well as older adults. We also have a lot of research that's going on in our particular center that deals with child development, which I think the group may find very interesting. We have the ACT Early Ambassador Program, which is really comprised of three different components. It includes a health education component, an ACT Early intervention. It includes studies on research and evaluation regarding the program. And on our website itself, we have a lot of good information, such as developmental milestone checklists, where you can find early education programs at the state level. There are a lot of examples of promising practices that people have used. It really is a wealth of information regarding, early childhood development, and I would encourage people to take a look at that if you're not familiar with that. I can definitely either follow up or put some of these resources in the chat if that would be helpful.
Yes, that would be helpful. Again, a wealth of resources. Thank you for that. Wow, it's exciting to hear that. Thank you, and thank you for coming to this meeting. We appreciate the good work that's going on at the CDC. Any other federal agencies that haven't been identified, and if not, I might turn it over to our friends at some of the small business development centers. I'm going to put Frank Cetera on the spot because he's just a wealth of knowledge, and he might be able to share some ideas.
Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate the call outs, and just want to appreciate everyone on the call as well. At the SBDC, we have in the last year formed the National Special Interest Section on Employee Ownership and Business Transition. We don't have any sort of specialized resources yet related to the care economy, but we hope that we'll be able to integrate with our other normal services as we continue to expand how we educate and update the skill set of our advisors into an understanding of cooperatives and other forms of employee ownership. We're having our first in-person meeting of this section this September. Our ASBDC, America's SBDC National Conference, being held in San Diego. If you're going to be there, I'd love to connect with you in person. If you're not going to be there, I'd love to connect with you via email so that we can continue to share, between our organizations and between our agencies. I'm hoping that over time, we continue to expand sort of the national breadth of services related to cooperatives and employee ownership in general out of the SBDC. I know there's lots of stuff happening in locations across the country that we're trying to continually identify and upgrade our understanding, such as, in Colorado and Northern California, some stuff here in New York. We're just trying to identify, put that information out there, share with our SBDC colleagues the information that's available, and the fact that, we are working on cooperatives and other forms of employee ownership, and that it's so important. I'm hoping that at some point we will be able to bring that into a better conjunction with specific topic areas such as the care economy and so forth. But right now, though, we are continuing to be present and build awareness as much as we can as we work to increase the number of co-ops that we're assisting with our free, no-cost, confidential business advising services, and looking forward to having this ecosystem just not only blossom, but be really relevantly, clearly defined so that we know where to go, when we need specialists, and people know where to go when they need to come to the SBDC.
Oh, well done. Well done. Thank you, Frank. Yes. Anyone else? Any other Small Business Development Center representatives that are here that would like to say a few words? Otherwise, Frank speaks well about on behalf of your organization. Very good. Thank you, Frank. So, any other federal agencies?
Margaret, I was hoping we could call on Matthew Lucina of the Colorado State. They have a very wonderful program in Colorado.
We're putting you on the spot, Colorado.
Not sure if he's still in the meeting. And then also Andrea Mosley, the director of the Alabama SBDC, was also in attendance earlier.
And hello, everyone. She's still here in attendance, but Frank did a great job.
Wonderful.
With, really explaining, some of our roles and things that we're doing in Alabama. We have not actually worked with the cooperatives, but this has been a strong conversation that we're having, and it's more so of us learning. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm trying to gain as much information as I can. So I serve about most of my counties really are rural counties, except for Montgomery, but everything else is rural. So I'm really trying to hone in a lot of information so that I'll be able to support them in those areas. And I'm glad to hear and listen to the information regarding the care community, because it just, the size of the electric companies, you know, cooperatives, there's so many other things that's out there that, you know, we can engage our rural communities in, small businesses, and connect them together with the resources. So I'm looking forward to learning more, and also possibly holding something with our Chamber of Commerce's in those local areas to maybe bring you all in to engage in another level of conversation from teaching them and training them.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And thank you for your willingness to dive into this area. Much appreciated. Good stuff happening in Alabama.
Thank you again.
Okay, yes. Last call. Any other representatives of federal agencies? If not, I think we will wrap this up. A good conversation, and I was going to share a slide, but I guess the technology gremlins have gotten the better of me again. So thank you so much for coming to this. We are having another conversation next Friday, focused on local foods and the food economy. And so if that is something of interest to you, please join us. We'll be sending out more information about it. Feel free to reach out to your colleagues. Megan, any last thoughts?
I think Tim has some last thoughts.
Oh, good.
Actually, I have Alex Stone of Cooperation Works put in the chat that guests can't access apparently the chat. So is there a way to capture that and send it to all the people, because there is a boatload of information in the chat that probably could be shared.
I am planning to do that. I did get that message. So I
Okay.
apologize to anybody who didn't get access to the chat. I think some people did.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's it.
good
Everybody have a
thoughts.
great weekend.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Hey,
for spending your Friday
Margaret and
with us. Yes.
Margaret and Megan, I just say a couple words. This is Jim Wadsworth, the branch chief of the Cooperative Services branch. I first want to thank Margaret and Megan for doing a terrific job with this. And I also want to thank Katrina and Doug and Tim O'Connell for their presentations. And then also the people that spoke up and told us more information. It was almost like you had those notes all prepared. But I was wondering, Margaret, if you might want to see if Karama wants to say any closing comments. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to chime in. Thanks for that opportunity. Such a good conversation today. So many good resources. I know it sounds like everybody didn't quite have access to the chat to see them, but I know those will be shared, so you'll have access to that. We are so looking forward to being able to share those resources even more broadly as we build this one-stop shop, this virtual one-stop shop for cooperative information. And so again, really appreciate your engagement. We welcome it continually. And so please reach out if there are other things that we can that you'd like to share in terms of resources or questions you may have, those kinds of things. And please spread the word on the other events that are coming out. If you know of others who want to participate in the conversations on the food economy, on the environment economy for cooperatives, and for our cooperative conversion economies, we'd love to have more participation in those as well. So again, thanks to each of you for your participation. Happy Friday, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Back to you, Margaret, to close it. Thanks.
I think Dr. Neal did an excellent job of closing it. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Megan, if you would like to stop the recording.
I'll go ahead and do that.
Great, thank you.